Good morning, or depending when you're listening to this, good afternoon, good evening, or good night. My name's Ross, and I was always told I had a voice for radio, so I've made a podcast all about the Pokémon trading card game. And you're listening to PTCG Radio. Now this week, I'm afraid there is really no news to talk about, so what we're going to do is we're going to go back to Roaring Skies. Now the street date for Roaring Skies, I can't remember exactly when it is. I think it might be next Wednesday. I will look that up and I will let you know as we go further into this podcast. However, yes, it is next Wednesday. I've actually got it up here, just double checking. It is next Wednesday, the 6th of May, which means it will be suitable for tournaments. It will be legal for tournament play as of Wednesday, the 27th of May. Remember, we now have a rather strict rule whereby 21 days after the street date in US, Europe, etc., Roaring Skies will be legal for tournament play. Now, going back to what I said on the podcast a couple of weeks ago about stuff being released early, I've been having a look around the internet and oh my goodness if Roaring Skies is not out early. It is a week until the street date. People have already got box openings up on YouTube and all of that, and there's cards all over eBay. And obviously people are going to have gone to the pre-release and gotten cards, and people are going to be reselling the cards they got from said pre-releases. But having complete boxes to sell on eBay, somebody's doing a boo-boo. Whether it is tournament organisers who are ordering in extra stock for people that aren't playing and then selling it on afterwards, or retailers breaking the street date, etc. It's kind of like what I talked about on the pod a couple of weeks ago from chaoscards.co.uk, the website that did a post complaining about it. It is, but complaining is maybe a bit harsh, but certainly mentioning it. And I suppose it's cool for people to get it early, but what it means is that Pokemon are going to get more and more guarded about this, and they're already starting to send the stock out late to the retailers to try and stop them breaking street date, and they might try other things in future, or screw around with the dates of pre-releases to make them closer, and it's just annoying that people are doing this. But hey ho, as always, get those shaming. For the record, I don't really care either way for this. I just foresee a situation later on where people are struggling to actually get hold of stuff when the set is released because too many people have broken the street date, and Pokemon are trying harder and harder to get the stuff released on time. But regardless, when it does come out, it's the 27th where it's going to be legal for tournament play. It's going to be very interesting because it's the weekend after that we see UK Nationals taking place on the 30th. So we are 4.5 weeks away, from Pokemon Nationals, so it will be very, very interesting to see how Roaring Skies affects UK Nationals, given that it will be legal, but it's not going to have been tested particularly strongly. There aren't going to be a huge amount of people who are actually going to be playing in tournaments prior to UK Nationals, so you can test it with your mates, and maybe there'll be the odd tournament. People in the UK are pretty good at putting on, little winner boxes, etc. before UK Nationals. I'm sure in the weekends between some stuff will be on, but it's just interesting that there's going to be so very little time for you to actually test this stuff out. So what we're going to do today is we're going to go through Roaring Skies, and we're going to look at the cards and see what's going to be good. Now, we have already done this a little bit when the Japanese set came out, but I like to do this twice. When we look at it with a Japanese set, you're getting my first impression. I've just had a look at this card, and this is my first thought. We've now had several weeks since then. I've talked to people about these cards, I've looked around other people's opinions, and I've had time to think myself. So consider these updated impressions, and I'm willing to bet a lot of people will have forgotten some of these cards. Obviously, ones like Rayquaza and Shaman people have probably remembered, but there's a bunch of these cards that people will have forgotten, so I think it is worth going through these and just giving people a reminder what's coming in this set. So starting off then, today we're going to go through trainers and EXs, and next week, as long as there's nothing else to talk about, we're going to look at the hidden gems. The non-trainer, non-EX cards, which are coming out in the set. So starting off then, we have Healing Scarf. Healing Scarf is a Pokemon tool, and when you attach it to your Pokemon, you heal 20 damage. Good in theory, never going to see any use, and the main reason for this is there are too many good Pokemon tools. When you take things like Focus Sash, and Weakness Policy, which are much better than this and seeing very little play, it really is still Float Stone and Muscle Band that are taking over, and of course, if you're playing Mega EXs, Spirit Link. That's what people are playing, and there's the odd decks here and there playing different cards, but in a world where Focus Sash and Weakness Policy Focus Sash being attached to a fighting Pokemon. If they would be knocked out, you give them 10 HP and discard it. And Weakness Policy being it gets rid of weakness. If those two tools are seeing very little play, I honestly can't see Healing Scarf seeing a huge amount of play. And it's a little bit sad, but what can you do? But going straight away to a card which is going to see quite a bit more play, we're going through in set order here, is Mega Turbo. Mega Turbo is a very good card. I love me some Mega Turbo. What Mega Turbo allows you to do is attach a basic energy card from your discard pile to one of your Mega Evolution Pokemon. Now, this is already good with Mega Rayquaza. Now, I'm going to talk about Mega Rayquaza quite casually, as if you all know what he does. I'll be dropping in little bits here and there, but go back to last week's podcast about speed decks, where at the end I have a good chat about Rayquaza. So if you're not up to speed on Rayquaza, please go back just to the very end of last week's podcast, the last little bit, when I talk about the future of speed decks, and I talk about Rayquaza in a bit of detail. So, Mega Turbo is going to be really, really good. Obviously, it's going to be good for Mega Rayquaza. Mega Rayquaza takes free energy, and you're going to be able to get him going in one turn, because he's got down to Evolution and a Spirit Link, so you can evolve him straight up. Free colourless energy means you can pop a double colourless on there, and you're still going to need one more energy. That's when Mega Turbo comes in. The combination of Delta Evolution and a Spirit Link allows you to get him going in one turn. You then go DCE, Mega Turbo, and you've got all the energy you need. But it's not just for him. Think of something like Mega Kangaskhan. Now, Mega Kangaskhan, unfortunately, was released before the Spirit Link started coming out. And as I've mentioned on the podcast a few times, Pokemon are making no signs that they're looking to retroactively release any of these Spirit Links, so it looks like Kangaskhan will never have a Spirit Link, and that's depressing. Same thing with Venusaur. Venusaur was always a very good card. That was, quite frankly, Mega Venusaur I should say, it was always a little bit slow. It took too much energy, and if you're going to sit there and pump a bunch of energy on, the best way to do it was Virizion, and if you're doing it with Virizion, you might as well go Genesect. This would make Venusaur playable again, and I think in some situations it might. But given that the format is speeding up so much, as I mentioned on last week's podcast, and given that Venusaur, you still lose a turn as you evolve up, that could be a pain. Same with Kangaskhan. What I really like this with is Manectric. Manectric takes 2 energy, at which point it does 110 damage and attaches 2 basic energy to your bench Pokemon. Now we're talking. Now you do still, unfortunately, have to wait a turn to evolve him, but you don't lose a turn through evolving him. You can evolve, so you can attack every turn, which is something that Venusaur doesn't have. Although I do really like Venusaur. I think some of you want to go and take another look at Venusaur in a deck with Mega Turbo. But what I really like here, and I suppose no, because even in a Virizion Genesect deck, you've got that dead turn where you can Emerald Slash, but you can't evolve Venusaur the turn you put him down, so you'd have to have kind of 2 dead turns, so even there it wouldn't work. I would love Venusaur as a kind of extra attacker in Virizion Genesect. You stick a Mega Venusaur up and just start Mega Turboing all the energy which has been knocked off Genesects back onto Venusaur. The problem is, turn 1 you can Emerald Slash, and then after that you really don't want to lose a turn to evolve, and you'll have to because there's no Spirit Link. Just thinking out loud there, but I do like the look of Venusaur. But the obvious ones here are Rayquaza EX and Manectric EX. I think they're both going to be really good with Mega Turbo. But this card, the thing I love about this card is we're going to have it in the set for 2 or 3 years on average. That's how long the cards stay in the format. So we can assume we're going to have it in 2 or 3 years. There's Pokemon EXs we haven't seen yet, which are going to be really useful for this. Another Pokemon I love with this, and I dearly wish they had a Spirit Link, is Absol EX. Remember that the EXs that come in sets like Diancie, Metagross and Absol Pokemon are not releasing Spirit Links for, and that is a little bit of a pain because Absol attacks for 2 energy, and with Mega Turbo, Absol would be awesome. But the fact that you've got to wait a turn to evolve him and lose a turn to evolve him really does make him almost unviable to play. And he's still going to be good, people are still going to use him, but he doesn't have that edge of speed Rayquaza has. Otherwise, Mega Turbo would be so good for Mega Absol. And I suppose one thing that is worth mentioning here is that Mega Rayquaza is really screwing over all the others, because the combo of Delta Evolution and the Spirit Link makes Rayquaza so much faster than the other EXs that it's really quite annoying that the other EXs, the other Mega EXs really are losing out. Now, there is a reprint of Revive, not much to say about this. It allows you to put a Pokemon on your bench, and this could be potentially useful in a Rayquaza deck or something like that. In these current decks where we're playing Lysandra's trump card to recycle your deck, you could just get away with playing one Revive. Most of the time, if you really want to redo your Pokemon, trump card will do that for you. Trump card will allow you to put your Pokemon kind of back into your deck, and you can even use something like Sacred Ash to put your Pokemon back. Revive isn't needed, it doesn't see a huge amount of play, but it's the kind of card that's nice to have in the format, because you can imagine there are decks when you really do just want to chuck Pokemon back onto your bench, and that's going to be possible here with Revive. I don't love it, but I think it's got some legs. A card I really like is Skyfield. And this is a stadium that allows you to have 8 Pokemon on your bench. And of course, if you bench 8 Pokemon, then there are certain things you can do with that. First of all, you just have a bigger bench. We've all had situations where we want a bigger bench, we want more Pokemon out. Skyfield allows you to do so. More importantly than that, it makes certain Pokemon more powerful. Now, first of all, Rayquaza EX, as we've talked about before. But another one that people are really getting excited about with Skyfield is Florges EX. It's got the attack for 2 energy, Bright Garden. This attack does 20 damage times the number of grass and fairy Pokemon you have in play. Now you can have 9 fairy Pokemon in play, which means that you're now doing 180 damage without a muscle band, 200 damage with a muscle band, and more if you start playing lasers as well. Florges, ladies and gentlemen, just got really, really good. Now, it takes 2 energy, and I suppose what you need here is you need Geomancy Xerneas. You need to use that Xerneas and have him going Geomancy for a couple of turns at the beginning. You could go a couple prizes down, but you could here potentially even be going ahead and, KOing Mega EXs in one turn. I mean, you'll really want Fairy Garden, so you're not going to be playing Burbank City Gym to go with your laser, at which point you could be maxing out at 230 damage, because Florges does 20 damage times the fairy Pokemon in play. Skyfield allows you to have 8 bench Pokemon, 9 Pokemon in total. 9 times 20 is 180. Add the Muscle Band is 200. Add the Burbank Laser is 230. And yeah, that does sound a little bit convoluted, but might I remind you, ladies and gentlemen, that this is a Pokemon which is attacking for 2 energy. And that is utterly, utterly crazy. So that is something which you do need to bear in mind here. It is attacking very, very efficiently, I suppose, is the way to go. Florges has already seen a bit of play. It's not done amazingly here, but now we can do a bit better. You can still play this with Hard Charm and Jamming Net like people did, like Emmanuel De Silva did over at the ECC. And you can still, you can play this with something like Slurpuff as a bit of a speed deck. If you're playing, now you would need to run Skyfield, of course, so I should have said that you're not going to be playing Burbank because you're going to be playing Skyfield. You're also probably not going to be playing Fairy Garden, but it's not the end of the world. Now, Mega Rayquaza EX has 220 HP, so you would still, if you played Muscle Band Laser, you would be 10 HP, 10 damage short. But then, of course, Rayquaza can die coming into your turn, or your opponent has got to try and recycle Rayquazas, which isn't always easy to do very early on in the game. So, I mean, we are looking here at potentially, a very, very good Pokemon. It's one, and you see this a lot, where new cards come out and old Pokemon suddenly become good. And if you run this with something like Slurpuff in a speed deck, then you really could be running, 4 Xerneas, 4 Florges EX, a few Slurpuff, and you're running through your deck so fast every turn that you're able to fill up your bench. And as soon as you Geomancy a couple times with Xerneas, you are rolling with Florges. So it's a deck which I think could become quite good. I certainly would expect to see a few of these if I'm playing at tournaments shortly after. Now, there is a supporter called Steven in the set, and of the 3 supporters I'm going to be mentioning, it is by far the worst. Search your deck for a supporter card and a basic energy. nobody likes Skyling for a supporter. We've all used Skylar to get a supporter, but nobody likes doing so. If you did do so, getting a basic energy as well is good, but really, you can replace this with trainer cards. And the general rule with supporters is, supporters are supposed to be so good that you'll play them, even though it's your only one you can play that turn. And Stephen doesn't really do anything. Professor's Letter gets basic energy. VS Seeker or Random Receiver gets supporters. And yes, I know that's 2 trainers as opposed to 1 supporter, but what you really don't want to be doing is using a supporter to grab a supporter to use next turn. First of all, it's really slow, and can I remind you again about last week's podcast and about the speed decks, but also you're telegraphing to your opponent what you're going to do. If you're going to go ahead and, if you Steven for an N, then your opponent knows they're getting a hand refresh the following turn. So they can play their hand to get rid of all their supporters and know that you're going to end them next turn. I suppose in that situation, maybe you top deck a Juniper and play that instead, but that's quite rare. If you search for a Lysandra, they know there's a Lysandra coming next turn. Not only that, but if you Steven for Lysandra on, let's just call it turn 1. You Steven for Lysandra on turn 1, you play Lysandra on turn 2, and then it's turn 3, 2 turns later, until you can actually play a supporter to get more cards and help you get set up. Unfortunately, I really don't like Steven. Sorry, Steve. Another card I'm not particularly keen on is Trainer's Mail. Look at the top 4 cards of your deck. You may reveal a trainer card you find there and put it into your hand. Shuffle the other cards back into your deck. This has a very, very specific use, and that is in, 2. Either in speed decks, where you're essentially just taking 4 spaces out of your deck to streamline it, or in decks where you really rely on a specific trainer card. So I can see Speed Rayquaza decks playing this to dig for a Mega Turbo or to dig for a Spirit Link, but honestly, you're better off just playing Acrobike and Shaman and Roller Skates, because that's going to be just as good a lot of the time. What this does, like I say, it either allows you to really dig for a card you want, but then so would Roller Skates, Acrobike and Shaman, but what it also does is it allows you to streamline your deck. In a speed deck, you want to make your deck as absolutely thin and easy as possible, and Trainer's Mail just allows you to run through your deck a bit faster. It essentially gives you 4 spaces, because all you're going to do is use Trainer's Mail, grab a trainer card, play it, and now you've just used 2 cards instead of 1. Not a fan. Something which I am a fan of is Ultra Ball. Now, Ultra Ball was going to be in the format for quite a while anyway, because we've only just had the Secret Rare released. And the rule is that as soon as a Secret Rare is, essentially if any version of the card is in rotation, all versions are. So the Secret Rare Ultra Ball was going to keep it in rotation for a little while. Now we've got this Ultra Ball from this particular set, which is going to keep this in rotation for a little while longer. It's not amazing. Well, actually it is. It's not amazing. We don't like using Ultra Ball, but it's a staple. It helps us, and to be perfectly honest with you, it's quite useful in that it's just good Pokemon search, and it's going to be in the format for a while longer. Now, one card I really like, and we talked about this a bit last week, I like Wally. Wally is a supporter, which I'm going to try and avoid using the Pixar-themed pronunciation of, because I'm sure it'll get annoying if I do it too often. Wally. But what we have here is a supporter which allows you to evolve into a Stage 1 on the first turn of the game, or with a Pokemon which has just been put down. So that's pretty darn good. You go second in a Donphan deck, and usually that sucks. Now, maybe you've got a Hawlucha and your opponent's got an EX and you can start attacking, but a lot of the time you just sit there and go, let's say you're in a Donphan mirror match, you go second and, well, that's it. Your opponent has got the first Donphan and you're screwed. Now you've got a Wally, and that means that you can get the first Donphan going second. And it's going to be useful, like I said last week, for decks like Execute, like Donphan. If you're playing a Stage 1 deck, you need to keep up with faster decks, and this is going to allow you to do so. It also shows an ongoing trend of Pokemon, and that's first turn evolution. Now, Broken Time Space hasn't come back. That was the stadium I mentioned last week, which allowed you to just evolve whenever you wanted. But we saw Eevee, which allowed you to evolve when you put it down, without having to wait by attaching a basic energy. And then we saw the ancient trait Delta Evolution, which allows you to evolve on the turn that the previous evolution goes down. And now we're seeing Wally, which allows you to evolve onto a stage 1 the turn you put it down. That's quite useful. So I like this, and it's interesting. I don't know how relevant stage 1 decks are going to be with all of your Rayquaza running around, and your Manectric running around, and your Florges running around, and your Groudon running around. But honestly, I think this is going to be... I love that this card has been printed, because this card is going to allow people to keep up the speed a bit with stage 1 decks. Now, as a player who's been playing Donphan for a little while and is considering going to a league challenge on Sunday with Donphan, if I can be bothered to get out of bed early enough. It's only a little one. Most of my friends aren't going, so we shall see. Down in Truro, incidentally, down in Cornwall. And my friends, most of them aren't down in Cornwall, at least my Pokémon playing friends. So maybe I go, maybe I don't. But as a Donphan player, I am loving the Random Receiver VS Seeker Juniper engine. I.e., I'm just running, these are the only cards I'm running. Except for one trump card because I have to, and one Corinna just to VS Seeker for it. So I don't know if I'm going to want to play a bunch of Wally because that's going to disrupt the engine, but maybe I could play a one-of in the same way I play Corinna. Either way, I love that this card has been printed. The last trainer I want to talk about today is Wide Lens. Damage from the attacks of the Pokemon this card is attached to... damage from the attacks of the Pokemon this card is attached to are affected by weakness and resistance from your opponent's benched Pokemon. I don't know if it's grammatically wrong on the English card. I'm reading a Japanese translation because Pokebeach is currently down, and that's the card the site I generally use for scans. Essentially, what it means is you hit the bench for weakness and resistance. Now, the only time I've ever really been able to take advantage of this in a game is the Espeon, which does 40 damage to bench Pokemon and does hit through weakness, which is brilliant for sniping Trubbishes in an Evolution deck, because Trubbish has 70 HP and is weak to Psychic, so your Espeon or my Espeon could do 40 damage times by 2 is 80 and knock it out. I don't think many people are going to use this, partly because attacks that hit the bench are not that prevalent at the moment. Not only that, but people want to use Muscle Band and Floatstone. Let's take an example of a card that often hits the bench. We're talking about, let's go Landorus. 30 to the active, 30 to the bench. Now, if I put a Wide Lens on Landorus, I am doing an extra 30 damage net if I am hitting a weak benched Pokemon. So sometimes I'm going to be doing an extra 30. But if I put a Muscle Band on, I am always doing 20 extra damage to the active. And I will take always doing 20 extra damage for occasionally doing 30 extra damage. I like Wide Lens as a concept. It's interesting. It's a fun little card. But I can't see it seeing a huge amount of play while we've got better tools in the format. And I'm sorry. I could see this being played with Manectric if Rayquaza got absolutely huge, because Manectric's first attack does 20 to the bench. And Swablu has 40 HP and a weakness to lightning, so you could one-hit KO Swablus on the bench. The biggest problem with this, of course, is that your opponent can you can only attack on either your first turn when your opponent's had a turn, or your second turn after your opponent's had a turn. So your opponent is always going to have a turn to evolve the Swablu, and Altaria has Delta Evolution, which means they don't have to wait a turn to evolve it. So if they can hit the Altaria, then it really doesn't matter, and then it takes away weakness anyway from all the colourless Pokemon. So I would love this against Rayquaza if I'm playing Manectric, which is a very niche situation. But the biggest problem is, first of all, the Swablus can be Delta evolved into Altaria, and they're always going to have a turn to do that. And secondly, when Altaria comes out, I can't even hit the Shaman and the Rayquaza on the bench for weakness. I really don't like Altaria. I really think that's a step too far for Rayquaza. He's got the Delta Evolution, he's got the Spirit Link, the Mega Turbo, the double colourless energy. He didn't need the Altaria to take away weakness. That is the bit that's really annoying me about this. Speaking of other things that Rayquaza's got, the last supporter in this set is Winona. Search for free colourless Pokemon. And let me make this very, very simple. If you are playing a colourless deck, this is your new favourite card. It searches for Altaria, it searches for Swablu, it searches for Rayquaza, it searches for Mega Rayquaza, and it searches for Shaman. The only thing it doesn't search for is Execute, and that's going to be a card that people are looking to play in Rayquaza decks. Purely because if you have your stadium knocked out, you go down to 5 bench Pokemon. So if you need to get bench Pokemon in a hurry, that's what Execute does. Execute can come out of the discard straight onto the bench, which is then going to make things like Landorus Bats much more interesting, because Landorus Bats can just pick off those 30 HP Executes all day long. Or your opponent doesn't use the Execute, but then of course they're going to be in a situation where they are going to be struggling to hit the numbers. Because if you're relying on Execute to hit the numbers, and then you can't use Execute anymore, you are going to struggle to hit the numbers. If you put the Execute on the bench, Landorus's Hammerhead and the Bats are going to do damage to your bench. So this is more of a kind of the next couple of weeks stuff on the podcast, looking at decks which get stronger and weaker from Roaring Skies. But a lot of the buzz around the interwebs at the moment is that Landorus Bats is going to get much, much better. I could see that happening. Manectric's getting better. Landorus Bats is good versus Manectric. And Rayquaza is looking good, but people are building it with Execute, and Execute falls prey to this stuff very, very easily. Mr. Mime on the bench, ooh, the Bats go through that. Although it does help against Hammerhead, I'll give you that. Now, in terms of Winona, you really can get whatever you want. You're staring down a Manectric with a Swablu on the bench, you search for an Altaria. You don't have a Rayquaza, you get one of them. You've got a Rayquaza and a Spirit Link, you get the Mega. You need to draw some more cards, you get a Shaman, etc. Decks that don't revolve around colourless Pokemon can still take advantage of this, because it searches for up to 3 Shaman. And searching out 3 Shaman is going to help you to run through your deck fast. Do be careful of benching that many Shaman. Outside of colourless decks, I'm not sure Winona is going to be the all-encompassing force that we want it to be, but honestly, for colourless decks, you can't get better. And the final kind of trainery card to have a look at is Double Dragon Energy. We don't need to go into Double Dragon Energy very much. Double Dragon Energy is very simple. It makes all of these Pokemon, these Dragon Pokemon that were previously too expensive and not worth playing, it makes them viable again, and that is absolutely wonderful for Dragon Pokemon. Dragon Pokemon have always suffered from being too energy heavy and having a weird combination of energy, fighting and water and all of that. Now, we don't need to worry too much about that, because we can just use Double Dragon Energy. Now, it is a special energy, which means Enhanced Hammer comes into play and all of that, but regardless, it's still absolutely viable, and it's something people are going to want to use. Now, the cards I didn't mention were Gallade Spirit Link, Latios Spirit Link, and Rayquaza Spirit Link. Oh, and I didn't mention we're getting a reprint of Switch. Switch has been in the format since the very beginning. It will always be in the format. There we go. Switch. But oh, and there's also secret rares of Energy Switch and VS Seeker, which I suppose is relevant. Energy Switch is also going to always be in the format. The interesting thing about the secret rare Energy Switch is that, VS Seeker, it means that VS Seeker will be in the format for as long as Roaring Skies is in the format, not for as long as, I think Phantom Force that came out, and I could be wrong about that. Regardless, it's, that was the last time it came out. So, yeah. And it was Phantom Forces. It was Phantom Forces it last came out in. So now it's essentially 2 sets newer, which means if Phantom Forces rotates, but this set doesn't, Roaring Skies doesn't, then it's going to remain in the format. As for the Spirit Links, I've said this a few times, but for people who haven't heard it, Pokemon seem very clear on this. If it comes out in a real, normal, everyday set, it's going to have a Spirit Link. If it has already come out, or it comes out as some kind of promo, or in a special box, like your Absol, your Metagross, your Diancie, etc., it's not going to have a Spirit Link. It's as simple as that. So yeah, Spirit Links, they're wonderful. So now let's have a look at the EXs, and obviously Rayquaza and Shaman are amazing. We'll have a quick look at them at the end, but I've spoken about them a lot since they were revealed on the podcast, so we don't need to go too far into them. There is a Thunderous EX coming out. It's not very good. It doesn't have a Mega, so it can't use Mega Turbo. It's weak to fighting, which is not great with Landorus still running around. For a Lightning and a Colourless, it does 30 more damage. It does 30 damage, which raises to 60 on a Heads flip and Paralyze on a Tails flip, which is interesting to me because Tails is usually bad, and I would rather have Paralysis for my opponent than extra 30 damage, about 80% of the time, I would say. It also does 150 for free lightning energy, and it does 50 to itself. This card is basically garbage. There are better Pokemon that you can do 150 damage with. Even if you're in Expanded and you're using an Eels deck, just use Zekrom EX or use Rayquaza EX, the old one from Dragons Exalted. I don't like Thunderous EX. Maybe people are going to use it and I won't hate them if they do. I just don't think it's a particularly powerful card. There's no good ability and neither of the attacks is particularly strong. I suppose the Victory Flip Victini with the ability that allows you to reflip coins from an attack. That was reprinted in Legendary Treasures. So you could use this to do 30 damage and paralysis, 75% of the time. But then the real problem with that is that you can't use this until turn 2, and it's only doing 30 damage. It would be far more viable against these, against Rayquaza, etc. Because 30 damage and paralysis for 2 energy, or 60 damage for 2 energy, can be pretty handy against lightning weak decks. But the biggest one of them is Rayquaza, and it's going to have Altaria to get rid of its weakness. I could really see this Thunderous being quite good against Rayquaza as a tech, if nothing else, if there was no Altaria to get rid of Rayquaza and Shaman's weakness, because 60 damage will one-hit KO a Shaman. But then again, we've got the Plasma Thunderous, which, by the time you include your Deoxys and your Muscle Band, is going to be far better for donking Shaman. And let's not forget that you've got your Colress machines and all to add extra energy to it. An energy in, turn 2, you can be doing a lot of damage with his second attack for 4 energy with a couple Colress machines. So, I'm sorry, I don't like this Thunderous as much as the other one. If I really want to choose a Thunderous hit for weakness, I'd choose the Plasma one from Plasma Freeze. Now there is a Gallade EX, 170 HP, Psychic Pokemon, Weak 2 Psychic, blah blah blah. Not terribly exciting. It's got an attack for a Psychic and a Colourless for 30 damage, which you have a choice to make your opponent switch their active. Remember that with Dimension Valley, this is 30 damage and switch the active for 1 Psychic Energy. But I'd rather have Mewtwo or Wobbuffet or Chandelure. There's numerous other Psychic Pokemon that can take better advantage of Dimension Valley than this. It has an attack for free Psychic Energy, i.e. no using Dimension Valley to lower the attack cost. 50 damage plus 20 more damage for each of your remaining prize cards, which means straight away it does 210 damage with a Muscle Band, that'll KO EXs, and then every prize card you take it gets weaker and weaker. But here's the problem, you cannot use this till turn 3, because you need to attach 3 different energy, unless you use, something like Victini EX to attach more energy. If you're attacking on the 3rd turn of the game and haven't taken any prizes, and then your Pokemon are getting weaker and weaker as you take them, that seems a little bit weird. So yeah, I don't like it. Now it does have a Mega and it's got 1 attack for 2 Psychic and a Colourless, and let's not forget Dimension Valley is back in play here, so let's call it 2 Psychic Energy. 110 damage, plus 30 damage to each of your opponent's bench Pokemon that has any damage counters on it. Useful, funky, far from amazing. Could be used in some kind of spread deck, but nobody's really playing spread decks at the moment. Could be funky as a bit of a tech in, let's say, a deck which uses your bats. But then the biggest problem here is you don't want a tech which is an EX, a Spirit Link, a Mega EX, and 2 energy if you've got the Stadium out. Yeah. Now, one card which I do think is very interesting is Latios EX. It's got an attack for a Psychic Energy, 40 damage. If you go first, you can use this attack on your first turn. Now, let's not forget that Trubbish is still a thing. Trubbish is Psychic weak. This will KO Trubbish. Let's not forget, ladies and gentlemen, that there's plenty of Pokemon like Spritzy, for instance, or Piplup, which have 50 HP or 60 HP. And this, with a Muscle Band, will do 60 HP. Now let's not forget that you can play lasers on turn 1. So now we're assuming that you've got a Muscle Band Verbank laser. You're doing 90 damage on the first turn of the game. Now we're cooking. People have, and a couple of listeners have sent me lists for this. So I think Daniel Irvin was one, sent me a very interesting list. A couple other people have. And what was really interesting, they were trying to make pure donk decks. I.e., I'm going to go first and I'm going to destroy with this. Remember, if you play in Expanded, you can use First Ticket for this deck. That's the card where if it's in your opening hand, you get to go first. So remember that you can play 4 of them. I've never had any luck with First Ticket. I did once go to a tournament with a deck that played 4 First Ticket. I lost the flip every game and went first on 1 round. Yeah. But it worked once. Oh, it was a terrible deck. Didn't play enough energy. Wasn't good. But you know, this is how we learn. But going back to Latios EX, 90 damage on turn 1 is pretty good. I don't think this needs to be played as a pure donk deck. I think you play it with Muscle Band Verbank Laser, because there's loads of decks that play Muscle Band Verbank Laser. And you basically just use Latios, to do between 40 and 90 damage on the first turn of the game. And then you've got Pokemon like Mewtwo, like Wobbuffet, etc. that you can use to clean up. Now, you play this with Wobbuffet. Let's say you do 60 damage on turn 1. Let's say you do 90 damage on turn 1. Well, Wobbuffet's now going to come in without a Muscle Band to do 100 damage. With a Muscle Band, he's going to come in and do 120. That adds up to 210 in total. Add another laser, and that Rayquaza's going down on the second turn of the game. So I don't think you need to play this as a donk deck. I think you play it as a, I'm going to go first, I'm going to do lots of damage on the first turn of the game, and I'm going to clean up with Wobbuffet. Let's not forget, ladies and gentlemen, that Wobbuffet turns off abilities of non-psychic Pokemon. Like, for instance, Rayquaza. Shaman. So Rayquaza decks, which are relying on Shaman to draw enough cards to get set up, now you can't use Shaman. And as a glorious way, and I've played decks of Wobbuffet in the past, I love Wobbuffet. Because people bench Jirachi, and then you tell them that they can't use Jirachi, but you've benched it, so keep it on the bench. Although I did let Alex Dow take it back, because Alex Dow's a lovely chap. But other people, I've kept them to it. Read the card. I've spoken to a couple people who really like the idea of playing Mewtwo Wobbuffet at Nationals. And if you're playing Mewtwo Wobbuffet, get yourself at least one Latios EX in there. Play it with Laser, play it with Muscle Band. I think it's interesting. What else is interesting is that Latios has a Mega EX. Now, I didn't actually tell you about Latios EX's second attack, did I? How rude of me. Let's get back to that one then. Latios EX, how rude of me. I do apologise, ladies and gentlemen. So it has a second attack, and it does, I believe, 110 damage, but it's got quite an interesting little effect to it. What it does is it stops any attacks of an attack other than damage. So it does 110 damage, and it prevents all effects of your opponent's attacks except damage done during the next turn. So there's no special conditions, or no Latios can't attack next turn, or any of that rubbish. Downside of this, Psychic, Water, Colourless. Now, Psychic, Double Dragon, Dimension Valley, that'll work. But really, it's too awkward of an energy cost. It's not particularly great, which is upsetting, but hey-ho. I think the best way to play Latios EX is as an opener in a Psychic-centered deck, because I love Wobbuffet, and essentially the biggest problem with Latios is he hits fast but not for enough damage. Wobbuffet comes in and cleans up. Not only that, but Wobbuffet is in a prime position to screw over the format when everyone's relying on Shaman. So is Silent Lab, I should say. But, you know, the format is probably going to start turning into people who play Shaman and people who play cards that stop you playing Shaman. Now, Mega Latios EX has one attack for a water, psychic, colourless, so you're going to need double dragon energy here. Does 120 damage to one of your opponent's Pokemon, including benched. Discard 2 energy attached to this Pokemon. Now, this is how I see a pure Latios deck playing. Although, just so we're clear, I still think you should play Wobbuffet. Because what Mega Latios does is he picks off the bench. Maybe I do 90 damage on turn 1 with Latios and my opponent puts that Pokemon to the bench. Don't worry, Mega Latios can snipe him. So you would need a Psychic Energy, or even, to be honest, No, sorry, Dimension Valley won't work. He's a dragon Pokemon, ignore me. But you've got your Psychic Energy and a double dragon, and you have to discard 2 energy to hit the bench. But that's okay, because double dragon is 2 energy. So all you need to do is have your Latios there, attach a double dragon energy, snipe the bench for 120, discard the double dragon energy, and let's not forget, ladies and gentlemen, that double dragon energy is special, and one of the big downsides is it can be gotten rid of. So I do see a Latios deck coming around. I don't think it's good enough on its own, and I don't think you really can rely on just trying to donk, because I don't think you're going to be doing enough damage. But using using Latios as an opener, sniping the bench with Mega Latios, and then having a Mewtwo or 2 and some Wobbuffet in there as alternate attackers, that I think's got some legs. One card which I'm really not keen on, other people like this a lot more than I do, is Hydreigon EX. And meh. I just don't like it very much. If there's a stadium card in play, the retreat cost of each of your dragon Pokemon in play is 2 colourless energy less. In a pure dragon deck, I suppose it works as a tech. You know, you can put this in instead of switches. It works like Darkrai did instead of Dark decks, I suppose. But nobody's playing purely Dragon decks. I would put Hydreigon on the save it for later pile. Get 1 or 2 if you can pick them up really cheap, because I don't think they're going to be expensive, because no bugger's going to want them. But, you know, pick up Hydreigon nice and cheap, if you can, and just leave him sitting in a binder somewhere. Maybe at some point in the future you want to play a whole dragon deck. Maybe then you can use it to free retreat. I mean, heck, I suppose you could even use, Mega Latios EX is a dragon Pokemon. I suppose you can use Hydreigon to retreat him, but I don't like having Pokemon just in there as a tech which can be Lysandre'd up. Because one of the worst things about Hydreigon, if there's a stadium card in play, the retreat cost of each of your dragon Pokemon is 2 less. He's got a retreat cost of 3. So that means that if you put him on your bench to lower the retreat cost of your dragon Pokemon, your opponent can Lysandre up Hydreigon, and he doesn't himself have free retreat. You would have to attach an energy to retreat the Pokemon, which got Lysandre'd up when you only had it in your deck to aid the retreating of your Pokemon. It makes no sense. I don't like him. I think there is room for him in the future. I think there are dragon decks in the future that could take advantage of Hydreigon. But honestly, ladies and gentlemen, right now, I don't like him. And then it brings us to Rayquaza, Mega Rayquaza, and Shaman. So let's be quick about these, because we really don't need to go into any more detail. Rayquaza EX is borderline broken. Rayquaza EX on its own has got a decent attack which does 60 damage to a Pokemon EX for 1 energy, but really it's Mega Rayquaza EX. 30 damage times the number of bench Pokemon for 3 energy. Use double colourless and Mega Turbo to get the energy. He's got Delta Evolution so you can evolve him on the first turn. He's got a Spirit Link so your turn doesn't end. We've got the Stadium, which allows you to have up to 8 bench Pokemon to do 240 damage. We've got the Supporter, which allows you to search for 3 colourless Pokemon. And you've got Altaria, which takes away your weakness. Yeah. We don't need to say anything else about that. It's ludicrous. And then Shaman EX is now a staple. It's going to be played in every deck. Now, the thing about Shaman EX is that Shaman EX is vulnerable. Shaman EX has 110 HP, but Jirachi has 90 HP, and almost every deck has been playing Jirachi, so there's no real reason not to play Shaman here. Yes, it's going to be vulnerable to being picked off the bench, but really, Shaman is going to be the last two prizes your opponent takes. Because if I'm using Shaman to build up a Mega Rayquaza EX and my opponent's taken out Shaman, wonderful. Because if I get my Mega Rayquaza EX hitting for 180 damage and one-hit KOing your EXs, fine. I'm going to one-hit KO your attacker and take out your energy. You're then going to KO a support bench Pokemon that's already done its job. And we're going to be even on prizes, but I've lost nothing that I need for the next turn, and you've lost your main attacker and your energy. You're going to lose that battle. So yeah, playing Shaman is going to give your opponent an easy 2 prizes at the end of the game, but it's still a risk worth taking. The other thing to mention, of course, is when Skyfield gets knocked out, you go from 8 bench Pokemon to 5, you discard 3 of them, discard the Shaman. That way, your Shaman get discarded, they can't be picked off the bench, and you can trump card and reuse the Shaman. So, little bit of advice there. Get rid of the Shaman. Now, I know there is also going to be a temptation to get rid of the Execute if you play them, because of course you can discard the Execute, play another Skyfield, and get the Execute back again, but that's going to be, you're going to have to judge that based on the situation of the game. If all you need to win is a couple of Execute next turn and you're ahead by a couple prizes, you can afford to lose a Shaman, keep the Shaman on your bench, put the Execute in a discard so you can grab them back. But if you're worried about your opponent taking cheap prizes, discard the Shaman, you'll be fine. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the trainers and EX Pokemon from Roaring Skies. Hopefully I have given you lots of useful information about them. Next week we're going to come back with the hidden gems, and then after that we're going to start talking about the decks which are going to get better. If you really want a quick list of decks in order to start testing for your nationals, which you're coming up with, basically in the next month, Seismitoad is going to be relevant because of all the trainers. Rayquaza EX is going to be good. Groudon EX is getting a bit of hype because it can one-hit KO your Rayquaza. Your, Landorus Bats is potentially going to be good. Manectric is going to be interesting. And some people are talking about Florges. They are not the only decks to consider, but from the buzz I've been hearing around the internet, they seem to be the decks that are getting a little bit of traction. Donphan is probably going to be pretty terrible against Rayquaza. Although, to be honest, if you can keep chucking up Robo substitutes and using Focus Sash and Life Dew, maybe they're actually going to run into a problem in that they're going to have to hit Lysandra 6 times to beat you, but you ain't going to have to be slow killing those Rayquazas. So, maybe Donphan's going to be relevant, I don't know. Anyway, it's not something I've heard people talking about. I think Donphan is going to be better than a lot of people. But let's save that for a couple weeks' time. Next week is going to be the hidden gems from the set. When I say hidden gems, I just really mean non-EX, non-trainers. So that is about it. My YouTube channel has been a teensy bit quiet. I'm trying to get the footage from Yeovil Regional, so don't give up, ladies and gentlemen. Those games will be going up soon. And if you haven't done so already, get your bad selves over to my YouTube channel. Just search PTCG Radio on YouTube or Google PTCG Radio YouTube. You'll find it easy enough, and you've got a bunch of games there from Nottingham Regionals recorded with commentary from myself. As always, if you want to email me, you can do so at ptcgradio@hotmail.co.uk, or you can tweet me at the Wassy. If you think I've misrepresented some of these cards, if you think I've missed anything, if you disagree or agree with what I've said, send me an email, tweet at me, and if there's any really good ones, maybe I will even share them on next week's podcast. Thank you very much for listening, ladies and gentlemen. Look after yourselves for the next week. My name's Ross, and you've been listening to PTCG Radio.